We're back. Welcome back, everybody, once again to the very anticipated Small Business Administration Loan Webinar with William Furman. He is the Senior Area Manager for the U.S. District, the South Carolina District Office for the U.S. Small Business Administration. We had a few technical difficulties, so we're going to start over the recording again. Welcome, William Furman. Thank you so much for everybody's patience, and we'll go ahead and get started.
Awesome. Thank you so much. It's good to be here. We've learned you have to be flexible, right? And so we're showing some of that flexibility this morning. And so I am the Senior Area Manager here in North Charleston. My office is in North Charleston, and I cover the coastal area of South Carolina. And we want to talk about the SBA disaster loan programs this morning. And so there has been a lot of confusion about some of this. It's been a journey is a good way to explain it, I think. We started in March. We opened what we call the Economic Injury Disaster Loan Program. I'll typically call that the EIDL Loan Program. And so we started that, and the CARE Act came along, and that modified the EIDL Loan Program to provide a grant that is associated with that. The CARE Act also came with its own program, and that is called the Paycheck Protection Program, or PPP. And so that is where some of the confusion lies. And what we're going to do today is talk about both of the programs. You know, this has been a journey. I think we're kind of on we are on the downhill side. Hopefully you have already applied for these programs, and we're going to talk about that. So I'm going to jump right on in and talk about the EIDL loan for a second. And this is our traditional SBA disaster resource. And so this is a program that has been around for years. Whenever there's a disaster, the EIDL program was available to assist those businesses that had incurred an economic injury. In other words, if they had lost revenue, they were having difficulty staying in business, they can borrow these funds for working capital to help them stay in business until the event passes and they're able to reestablish their business. Now, the big news this morning is, again, you just have to realize that everything is flexible, everything is changing. We get different news every day, so just bear that in mind. We just have to work with that. And with that said, overnight, SBA temporarily closed the application portal for the Economic Injury Disaster Loan Program. And so those applications that are in will be handled on a first-come, first-served basis. And the reason that it has closed is that there are limited funds that are available. And so, you know, I think we have more than enough applications in the system right now to use the available funds that we have as of today. Now, if you've followed the news at all, you know Congress is talking and negotiating about providing additional funding for the SBA disaster programs. A lot of the focus has been on the PPP, but I think the EIDL loan will be included in with that, or at least I hope it will be. So you just have to follow the news. Hopefully Congress will act quickly on this, and that SBA can reopen that portal for loan applications. But, you know, I think the best thing to do today is we continue to go through this program, make sure you have all the accurate information as of today with the understanding that things change. Anything I say, please don't call me a liar. Anything I say today is subject to change. So I'm trying to give you the best information available at this point in time. And so you have the EIDL program that we're going to talk about, and then we have the Paycheck Protection Program, PPP program, and it is part of the CARE Act. This came directly from the CARE Act, part of the stimulus package, to provide funding to businesses, primarily for payroll. And so we're going to talk about that. Funding will likely be exhausted today. It's really just down to the wire at this point. You know, while we're on this webinar, funding may be exhausted. So definitely feel like it will happen today. And so let's go to the next slide, and we'll talk more about all of that as we go through it. Oh, wait a minute. I'm sorry. I'm in control. Okay, so if the next slide would be SBA's Economic Injury Disaster Loan Basics. What businesses are eligible to apply? So really it's any typical commercial business that is eligible to apply. You know, it does have to be a small business, and we'll talk about that. Well, basically a small business for this particular program, actually it has changed. So we are calling a small business any business that has 500 employees or less, a small business. So if your business has 500 employees or less, for the disaster programs, you are considered a small business in the eyes of SBA. We can also do some other things like agricultural cooperatives, aquaculture businesses, and this one has gotten a lot of attention. It can be used for nonprofits. This includes businesses that are either directly impacted by the disaster or indirectly. So many times individual counties or regions have been declared disaster areas. In the past, it's actually always been that way. You know, a good example will be the tornadoes that occurred this week. You know, we've already received inquiries about the damage that has been done. You know, I think Charleston County escaped pretty lightly. However, Berkeley County, Moncks Corner, there was a lot of damage. Colleton County, there was a lot of damage. Hampton County, there was a lot of damage. And so we're already fielding inquiries. And the way this works is that the governor actually will collect data on the specific type of damage and the number of businesses as well as homeowners that incurred disaster, and then he will make a request to SBA to make a disaster declaration. And so that happened early on in March for this particular disaster, and SBA made a declaration for an economic injury disaster loan program. And just for information, that is going on right now for the tornadoes, but it will likely include a portion for physical losses as well. So those businesses that were damaged, that had physical damage, as well as homeowners that had physical damage, that will not be compensated by insurance, uncompensated losses, they will very likely be able to obtain a SBA disaster loan, assuming that the declaration is made for the tornadoes. But it certainly, from what I've seen, it certainly looks like it's pretty serious, and I would think a declaration for that will be coming. So with that said, let's go to the next slide. This is going to be SBA's Economic Injury Disaster Loan Basics. And so what is the criteria for loan approval? Loan approval is tied to really three things. Your credit history, and SBA does not look at credit history like other businesses or other banks. SBA looks at your credit history overall. We do not use a credit score. If you have any glitches or derogatory accounts, you do have the ability to provide an explanation to SBA as to why that occurred. And many times in those situations, SBA is able to work around that and still approve your loan. Now, there are a couple of things, though, that are pretty much automatic rejections or no's on the credit history, and that one is if you have any delinquent federal debt. And we're going through some of this on the PPP side of things right now, where people had old SBA loans that are still hanging out there, that are causing them issues and rejection. So if you're delinquent on a federal debt, it could even be tax returns, federal taxes, that is going to be a turn down due to your credit history on SBA. Now, if you have a workout plan, SBA can use that, and you can receive approval as far as credit history goes if you have that workaround. The other big issue is, is child care or child support. If you are behind on child support, that is going to get you a rejection for credit history. If you have a payment plan to correct that past due amount, then SBA can work with that, and you would be approved. So those are two of the big hurdles on credit history that you need to meet. Now, repayment, that's another big one. There's some confusion on this one as well. I've had several calls from people asking me about repayment and basically, asking how they can repay a loan when their business is not even open. And so SBA is not looking at what your situation is today at this moment. What they're looking at is what your repayment was prior to the event. And if you were profitable prior to the event, if you had cash flow, if you had debt service coverage, you would be considered to have repayment today. That is the entire purpose of the EIDL loan program, is to provide you with working capital so that you can pay your bills and remain in business, so that your business will be in operation when the pandemic passes, and you'll be able to reopen, reestablish your business, stabilize your business, and move forward. So the other scenario would be if you had issues, financial issues prior to the event. If you were delinquent on your bills prior to the pandemic, if you had cash flow problems prior to the pandemic, if you had past due accounts, those would be reasons that SBA would deny your request based on repayment, because if you had problems before the pandemic, SBA would not make a loan to try to resolve that. This has to be tied directly back to the pandemic and the situation with this particular disaster. Now, eligibility, the entire state of South Carolina has been declared a disaster, and so that one is easily met. It doesn't matter where you live in South Carolina, you are considered eligible for the location of the disaster. Okay, let's look at terms. SBA's economic injury disaster loan terms. How much can I borrow? And this one is going to be a little touchy. Now, so the eligible entities may qualify for loans up to $2 million, and that is under normal circumstances. And SBA they're struggling with this because there has been so much demand for these EIDL loans.
William, I'm sorry to interrupt, but I don't see the next slide. It's Rebecca. There we go.
Yeah, I don't think I have control of it on my end.
Yes, sorry, I've got control of it. I apologize.
Yeah, okay, we're good. So the terms of the loans say they can go up to $2 million, but due to the fact that there's such an overwhelming demand and there is a set amount of funding, funding is limited. SBA is doing their best to make sure that as many businesses can be assisted as possible. And so what they're doing is they're providing up to two months of working capital for small businesses. And then they keep bouncing around this idea that the 2 months, it would either be 2 months of working capital or $15,000, whichever is less. And so I just want to prepare you. You're just going to have to, if you've applied for the loan, continue, once SBA gets to you and processes your loan, hopefully they're going to back off of that $15,000 limit. I've seen it go both ways, quite frankly. I've seen some businesses that got significantly more than $15,000, and then this morning I was provided a letter that a business received from the Office of Disaster Assistance saying that it was going to be limited to $15,000. So all I can tell you is just be prepared for that. It may be $15,000, it may not be, but just know that that's the situation, know why that is occurring, and hopefully there will be additional funds. So even if it were $15,000, that does not mean that that is all you're going to get. That would be the first disbursement. And so hopefully Congress would provide more funding, and then you would have additional disbursements up to the loan that you're requesting. So just want to be clear on that. We'll have to see how that goes. Now, The interest rates are 3.75% for small businesses, 2.75 for nonprofits, and the terms are for up to 30 years. So a 30-year loan makes the loan payments very affordable, and gives you the opportunity to improve your cash flow. Now, the other thing I need to mention while we're on terms is that this particular loan will be deferred for 12 months. So when you receive that working capital, you will not have to make any loan payments to SBA for this loan for 12 months. So this time next year, your first payment would be coming due. Now, the other thing you need to understand is that you may have another disaster loan from a hurricane or a flood. We've had a lot of federally declared disasters in the last 5 or 6 years, and so there are a lot of these loans out there. All the current SBA disaster loans are being deferred for 6 months. So that is another burden off of the business, and it helps with cash flow during this stressful time. And so that's going to be a benefit to you as well. Again, the loans are based on size. We talked about this being a small business, and the 500 employees does come into play for this particular disaster. Prior to that, SBA made determinations based on what we call the North American Industry Classification System, and it can still be used for this as well. There's some situations where businesses may have more than 500 employees, but based on their what we call their NAICS code, the definition of small business may be more than 500. So some of the manufacturers may even have up to 1,500 employees and still be considered small. But just to simplify it for this program, the EIDL and the PPP, we're saying if you have less than 500 employees, you're a small business and you can move forward. Now, the next thing is the $10,000 initial advance, and what I call that is a grant. But the EIDL was beefed up. I've even said it's on steroids after the CARE Act. The CARE Act provided the availability and the option to provide up to $10,000 for EIDL loan applicants that does not have to be repaid. And so again, there's been tremendous demand for this, and so what SBA has done is they have made the determination that $10,000 will be based on each employee. So if you have if it's a sole proprietor, it's just you're the employee, you can expect to receive $1,000. If I have, let's say I have 5 employees, I would receive $5,000. And then if I had 10, of course, I'd receive the full amount. And anything over 10, you would receive $10,000. That's the max. So just want to make sure you understand that. So how can I use the funds? These are working capital loans that may be used to pay fixed debts, payroll, accounts payable, other bills that have been paid had the disaster not occurred. So the loans are not intended to replace lost sales or profits for expansion. So working capital comes from your sales, and so you do need to understand that. It comes from your sales and your profit. And so I don't want that last sentence to confuse you. Basically, the loans can be used for any expense that you had prior to the pandemic. So, any fixed costs can be paid. You can use this, and this is going to be you can use it for payroll, but be careful if you're going to receive a PPP loan, because then that would be a conflict with PPP, and we're going to talk about that later. So I encourage people to use their EIDL loans specifically for working capital. So if you have bills that have to be paid, that's fine. Any utilities, if you have to purchase any raw materials, inventory, to continue business, all of that is fine. What you cannot do is you cannot expand your business. You can't buy new equipment. You can't buy vehicles. You cannot use it to refinance debt. A lot of people have asked if they can restructure their debt with this. No, you cannot. But you can pay the loan payments associated with that debt with no problem. So it can be used for that. So just want to be clear. Okay, let's let's go to the next slide. This would be titled Economic Injury Disaster Loan Terms. What are the collateral requirements? Now, typically, the disaster loan would require collateral for anything over $25,000. Now, from what I've seen, the Office of Disaster Assistance is waiving this collateral requirement. So if you get offered a loan of greater than $25,000, that would be something that you would need to check to see if the Office of Disaster Assistance is requiring collateral. Because from what I've seen so far, they are not. And so I think this particular rule has been waived. But SBA can take does take real estate as collateral, and it's available. If you have a collateral shortfall and you aren't able to cover the loan or adequately secure the loan with collateral, that's not a problem, because SBA is a cash flow lender, and we will not decline a loan for the lack of collateral. So that's another one that's, again, things change every day here at the SBA. I can tell you it's been kind of a wild ride, but we're going to get through this. You know, the system is up and running. You know, it's only been, I think, 2 weeks. And so, or actually a little less than 2 weeks, and so, especially for PPP, and the funds are being advanced now. I'm talking to people every day that are getting their funds from EIDL, so things are looking up on these disaster programs. So how is SBA's working capital loans different from other SBA loans? And this is a big difference. This is the only time SBA ever makes loans directly to small businesses. So when you hear people talking about going and getting an SBA loan for their business, what they're really talking about is we have three primary programs, and one is called a 7A loan, one is called a 504 loan, and then one is a micro loan. And all of those loans are really guaranteed by SBA, or SBA provides funding to the banks so that they can make loans to small businesses. The guarantee really acts like an insurance policy to the loan, to the lender. It reduces that lender's risk and encourages them to make loans. So this is different. The EIDL, you apply directly to SBA. Now, if you have a current SBA loan, this is very important too. This is going to be a big help to you if you have a 7A, a 504, or a micro loan. SBA is going to, number one, loans will be deferred for up to 6 months for those particular programs. Number two, in addition to the deferral, SBA is actually providing the lenders with loan payments for the next 6 months. So starting with your April payment, your SBA loan will be paid by SBA. So SBA is actually going to generate checks to send to the lenders over the next 6 months to pay for those outstanding loans. So that's going to be a huge help to the SBA borrowers over the next 6 months. I want to make sure that everybody is aware of that. If you do have one, what you would need to do would be to reach out to your lender and talk to them, and SBA's working out the details on how they'll get those funds to the lender. So just be aware of that. That's some good news. So the economic injury loans, the EIDLs come directly from the U.S. Treasury. Thus, the problem with one of the problems with us, SBA, having to close the application portal. So those funds are being exhausted, and so we did have to close temporarily the portal because those funds do come from the Treasury. So Congress right now is considering and debating what they need to do to increase those funds and get additional funds from the Treasury. Applicants do not go through the bank to apply. Instead, they apply directly to SBA's Disaster Assistance Program. This would take you to the portal. You can go and look at that, but it will not let you in to apply right now. If you haven't applied, pay attention. One thing you would need to do is go to SBA.gov. That's the main SBA website. Look at the bottom of the page, and there's a place where you can actually subscribe to receive email updates. It's very important, if you have not applied, to get those updates so that you can apply as soon as you can when that portal is reopened. There's no cost to apply. There's no obligation to take the loan. And so you need to apply. If and when you can apply, you need to apply. And so that gives you an option. And the more options you can have at this point, the better off you are. You know, it doesn't cost anything. You're not obligated. If you turn it down, it still doesn't cost anything. The maximum unsecured loan, we're showing $25,000, but again, I think that's been waived. Applicants can have an existing SBA disaster loan and still qualify for the EIDL for this disaster, but the loans can't be consolidated. These loans stand on their own. They are made for different disasters, for different purposes, so they cannot be combined. Each one would stand on their own, but that's not should not be an issue. Again, existing disaster loans are deferred for 6 months, and the new disaster loans are going to be deferred for 12 months. So you should be able to work with that. All right, going to the next slide. Applied for EIDL and want status. Boy, everybody wants the status, and I don't blame them. I would like to see the status as well. This has been an issue that has come up. You have to imagine there are a couple of things we're fighting here. Number one, just the overwhelming volume of applications that SBA has received. Number two is the IT systems that, at least initially, were not ready for the influx of applications. That created some issues. And just to give you a little history, and this is an important, another important note, we started out with a portal. A portal that you actually went in, and it was very in-depth, and in a matter of a day or two, it was unable to handle the volume, and it crashed. So they developed a workaround where you actually had to upload the formal application. You completed the application, printed it, completed it, scanned it, and uploaded it. And then we're on the third version. That went away, and now it's simply 4 screens. And I have a slide that explains that, and so you just complete the 4 screens and move on. And so there really, honestly, there really is no way to check the status of your loan. You can call disaster customer service, but when you call, you're very likely going to be told that from that rep that they don't have the ability to check the status either. All we can tell you at this point, we don't have the ability to check it here locally. All we can tell you is that it is taking about 3 weeks for disaster assistance to get to all the applications. They've waived a lot of the requirements. They've streamlined a lot of things, trying to speed the system up, but it is taking longer than they expected. You may have seen at one point they were telling people that you would see your initial advance up to $10,000 within 3 days. That did not happen, and they've changed the language on that. But ultimately, what I'm seeing is this taking about 3 weeks, just to be upfront and honest with you, to see when, you know, before you receive a direct email from the Office of Disaster Assistance about your EIDL loan. So just want you to be aware of that. If you call me, there's absolutely nothing that I can do for you on your status. But the good news is I'm getting more and more every day. I get more and more calls and emails from people who have actually gotten their money. And so these are people that applied in mid to late March. And so we're starting to see those funds roll through. So that is good news. All right, let's go to basic filing requirements. Again, I've pretty well touched on this, but it's very simple, and it is the portal is closed, but there are 4 screens. It does have a request up to $10,000 advance for bank and your bank account information. Hopefully, if you applied in the early stages, you went back in and applied with the latest version, and you were able to give your bank account information and request that $10,000 advance. That you should have received an email notice for that. I would hope that if you didn't, you would still have the opportunity, you know, when they process your application. And so, you know, we'll just hope most people that I talk to have. So, but just be aware of that. If you did not, and you receive an offer from SBA, you need to talk to them and make sure that you are eligible and obtain whatever you qualify for that $10,000 advance that does not have to be repaid. All right, ineligible entities. Just quickly, agricultural enterprises. This has been a big one. There was a big push from the agricultural community, from farmers on this, but the way this particular program is written, agricultural enterprises are not eligible. And so they are eligible for PPP, but not EIDL. And so just want to be clear on that. The other thing that SBA doesn't like is gambling concerns, casinos and racetracks. Those are not businesses that SBA really funds. And then businesses of a sexual nature. I call those sin-based businesses. None of those are eligible. All right, assistance from SBA partners. Really appreciate all the work that both SCORE and the Small Business Development Centers are doing to assist businesses in this trying time. I can tell you that they all have been working very hard with assisting businesses, both with the applications for disaster assistance and other issues that are arising from the pandemic. And so they will continue to do that. The beautiful thing about our resource partners is that they can provide this assistance at no cost to you. And when we get back to normal times, they can also help you with business plans. They can help you with your financial statements. They can help you put together loan packages for commercial lenders for SBA loans or any other loan for that matter. And so we do have a very active SCORE, and we have Mary Butler on the call today with us. And thank you again, Mary, for all the work that you guys are doing there. So that is a good resource. We also have the Small Business Development Center as a resource here, and they are available too. Right before the pandemic struck, SBA was about to make an award for a Women's Business Center. We were hoping actually to get 2 new Women's Business Centers in the state, and that kind of got sidetracked. I think we're still doing that. It's been put on pause until we get through the disaster programs and we get some sort of normalcy back. I think you'll see that move forward. We're also just take a look, sign up. We're going to have some exciting programs coming up too when we get past this. So be sure to sign up and receive our email updates. That's very important. The U.S. Department of Treasury. I want to make sure you're aware of this. This is where all the notices are coming out for the particular programs. And so here's a link to that. If you just go Google U.S. Department of Treasury, they have a big banner up at the top about COVID-19 and resources. And if you go to there, it's going to give you all the up-to-date information on PPP primarily loans, and they're putting information there every day. I mean, it was explained to me as an airplane that SBA and Department of Treasury got in flight, and they got the airplane up in the air and it's flying, but not all the systems are operating. And so they're still installing systems on that airplane, including the landing gear, so that we'll be able to land the plane at some point. But just keep that in mind. It is changing every day. We're still getting additional policy written that administers these particular programs. So we're trying to do our best with what we have, and every day it gets better. So we're gonna get through this. All right, submit your application as soon as possible. Here at this point, I think if you have not submitted, you will have missed out on the first round. Again, PPP money may have run out by the time we get off of this webinar, and they have closed the portal for EIDL. Again, if you are in EIDL, if you got your application in, it is being processed first come, first serve. If you had to go back in to update your application to request the $10,000 advance, I have been assured that you did not lose your place in line. So if you applied early and had to come back in, you still should have a spot, up at the front where you were. You didn't get kicked out of line for that. So just be prepared. Follow the press. Follow SBA. I do think we'll receive additional funding. So if you have not applied, be ready to jump online and get in that portal and get your application in as soon as you can when it reopens. All right, that brings us to the PPP. We're running maybe just a few minutes behind, but I do want to give you a kind of an overview of this program. We can't go too deep in it. I have an airplane here. We're giving you the 30,000 foot tour of PPP this morning, but we did have $349 billion in forgivable loans for this program. We have processed over 100 million applications across the U.S. And so right now we've done 340 plus billion, if not all of it, at this point. So the last loans are getting entered into the system with this particular pot of funds, and hopefully they will resupply those funds, and we can continue. Just to give you an idea, you know, I didn't change this, but as of April 9th, there were 500,000 applications for 130 billion. And so that is exactly a week ago. So that gives you some idea of the pace at which these loans are being made. It's really pretty incredible what has been done and how quickly it's been done to get these funds out and get assistance out. So the maximum size of the loan is $10 million for PPP. The funds must be used for payroll, mortgage interest, rent, and utilities over an 8-week period after the loan is made. So you only have 8 weeks to use those funds once the loan is made. We call it the PPP program, and you need to think payroll, 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 because that is the primary focus of this program. You can only, you have to use at least 75% of those funds for payroll, and you can use 25% of that for mortgage interest, rent, and utilities over that 8-week period. Okay, so that's very important to keep in mind. Employees and compensation levels must be maintained. You've got to supply, or you supplied, if you applied that number, you had to give a head count, and that would have been the average number of employees over the previous 12 months for that. You also had to provide or payroll records to support the level of payroll that was going to those employees. Again, this is a loan this is actually a type of 7A loan, and so commercial lenders are processing these for SBA. It does come with a 100% guarantee from SBA. So that's the first time I've ever seen this as well. Never seen a program where the government guaranteed a bank 100%. So what that means is that the bank does not have any potential risk. If the loan were not to be repaid, SBA would make that lender whole. All right, who is eligible? Again, it have to be a small business, 500 employees or less. Most nonprofits and faith-based organizations are eligible, and trust me, they have found out about this, and I think most churches have applied and are receiving funds through PPP. Sole proprietors and self-employed, independent contractors, they are all eligible to apply as well. And so that window for them opened last Friday on the 10th. They were able to apply for that. So I know we have some sole proprietors, and I talked to some lenders yesterday. They were processing applications for them. The business must have been in business since February 15th of 2020. So if you started a business in March, unfortunately, you would not be eligible for the PPP program. It has to have been in business since February 15th. How much do I qualify for? The maximum is $10 million. And basically, I'm not going to go through all this, but there are formulas that you can use for companies that have been in business a year, less than a year, or if you're a seasonal business, there's a different formula. But let's just I'll look at one. Let's say your business has been in business for a full year. Let's say you determine that your average payroll was $10,000 per month. It's pretty simple. You just find your average payroll, And that can include other things like, you know, vacation pay and other benefits can be included with that. But you calculate that average payroll and multiply it by 2.5, which represents 10 weeks. So if I have an average month of 10,000, I multiply that by 2.5, that's going to give me a payroll or a loan amount of $25,000. And that would be my loan amount for PPP, of which I would have to spend 75% of that on payroll, and then I could use the other 25% for rent, utilities, and mortgage interest. And so that is how you actually calculate what you qualify for. Just a few more details. You do have to apply through SBA lenders. The interest rate on this particular loan is 1% fixed with a 2-year term. So, you know, every business is different. EIDL may be better for some businesses because, you know, it is a low interest rate and amortized up to 30 years. Even though this may be totally forgiven, it is focused just on payroll. And so it just depends on your business, what your expenses are, you know, whether you're heavy into employees or there may be other expenses, working capital that is really expensive. So you just have to determine what is best for your business. These payments are deferred for 6 months. So if you get a PPP loan, you have 8 weeks to use the funds. And then really from like week 8 to week 10, you should be providing all the documentation to your lender to have your loan fully forgiven. So you need to, you know, follow the rules, follow the conditions, do good accounting, and submit the information for full forgiveness. No collateral is required. No personal guarantee is required. Applications are still being accepted to the best of my knowledge. So again, we're probably going to stop today. The way I and if I had a crystal ball, I would probably say there's going to be a short break. Congress at some point will come together. They will agree to provide additional funding. What that level looks like, we don't know. And then we will start again. But applications for independent contractors and self-employed, again, that started last Friday. Already mentioned a couple of times that the loan is 100% guarantee. So how is my loan forgiven? So let's move on. You've gotten the loan, and this is where a lot of people are now. You've received the loan. You have the funds, and what you need to know is that you have to use the loan proceeds for payroll costs, mortgage interest, rent, and utilities over the 8 weeks. Right? I already told you that not more than 25% can be used for those non-payroll costs. So it's going to be very important for you to follow that. After the loan proceeds are used, request forgiveness from the lender, providing all necessary documentation for employee retention and financial documentation. SBA has not provided the lenders, and you will be providing that to the lenders, not SBA, but they have not. SBA still has to get the final regulations out on exactly how this loan forgiveness is going to take shape and exactly what the lenders will have to do, what the documents that they'll be able to accept. And so that's important. And Treasury, that you have the link for Treasury, that will be posted on Treasury at some point. Again, every day something new shows up there. So that's a good place to check. You know, if you're checking websites daily, that's a good one if you have a PPP loan, just so you can keep track of exactly what's going on. Banks that don't participate, you know, my recommendation is go to your business banker. The next step would be to go to a lender that you had a relationship with. And then third, if all of that fails, go to SBA's website, South Carolina website, and we have a list of all the participating SBA lenders, and you can work from that list to find a lender that will make PPP loans. You know, a lot of non-traditional and non-bank lenders have jumped in the fray as well, so you can go online and do a little research, and you'll find all sorts of non-traditional lenders that will also do these PPP loans or are now eligible to do the PPP loans. So finding a bank shouldn't be too much. It was really difficult to start with, but that crisis is pretty well calmed down.
William, it's Mary Butler. If any of the folks in the audience are finding themselves without a bank or without a relationship, and the bank is not lending or participating, try US Bank. They're out of Minneapolis. You can see on their website that they were offering loans to non-existing customers. And that was the only bank that I was able to find that's fairly good size and fairly well known that was making that allowance.
Yeah, and another point I'll make, and initially I was telling people to seek those large lenders that had SBA loan departments because they knew the system and they should be efficient at processing. But unfortunately, what we found out was that they became quickly overwhelmed as well. And I'm not going to call any names, but there's some very large banks that businesses have applied to. They applied early in the game, and as of this morning, I had several emails. They still had not received their funding, had not gotten a loan obligation from SBA. So that's going to be a sore point for a lot of people that did apply with a bank. The bank said they would do it, but just due to the overwhelming number, they didn't get to the application. So that's going to be a hot topic and a kind of a sore point. But hopefully we'll get additional funds and that will work itself out too. So this is important. This is really important if you have an EIDL and a PPP, because you can get crossed up on this and it would hurt you in the end. You can apply for both an EIDL loan and a PPP loan. What you cannot do is use those funds for the same purpose. And so if you've got an EIDL loan and you use that loan to pay payroll, what is supposed to happen is that entire loan, EIDL loan, would be rolled into a PPP loan, and I don't think it all would be forgiven. There's a good chance, and again, SBA's got to get additional guidance out on this, a significant amount of debt that had to be repaid in 2 years. So to avoid any of that, make sure that you use your EIDL loan for working capital purposes. Do not use your EIDL loan or the EIDL grant for payroll or for payroll. Use it for working capital, and then use your PPP for payroll. Okay, so you want to keep those separate. You don't want to commingle them. You don't want to pay the same items with using both sources of funds. Now, any grant you receive from EIDL will either be rolled into your PPP loan or deducted from any PPP loan forgiveness. So you're not going to be able to get two grants. You can't get a grant from an EIDL and you can't get a grant from PPP. That would be double dipping. And so just for instance, let's say you got a $100,000 PPP loan and you got a $10,000 EIDL grant. That EIDL grant is going to be deducted from your forgiveness. So in the end, you would still end up owing $10,000 on your PPP loan, or at least that's the information that we have today. Again, SBA is working through some more of this, and that is the way it stands as of right now. So if it turns out to be different, just believe that I'm giving you the information, the accurate information as it is today. So just be, again, you can follow up on Treasury. I know SBA and Treasury are working through some scenarios. You know, when they change one rule, then it changes other things that they don't anticipate. So they have to go back and try to correct that. It's almost like a chain reaction. A good strategy, though, is to use your PPP for payroll and then use your EIDL for working capital, notes payable, accounts payable, so that there is no duplication. And you just want that to be clear. You can accept your PPP first and then decide whether to use your EIDL approved loan or not. You can always decline that. A best practice is to considering keeping these funds in separate accounts for EIDL and PPP so they don't get mixed up, and document the use of funds appropriately. And so you just want to be able to show at the end of the day where every dollar from PPP went and what it went for. You want to be able to show that you're going to meet that 75% for payroll, so that you can have the entire loan forgiven. That's a very, very important piece of this. With that, we're a little bit over, but I am here. I can take questions for as long as we need to take them.
William, I do have some questions. It's Rebecca again that folks have submitted. First question, if I spend the payroll protection loan over the required 8-week period and within the guidelines, how long after that 8 weeks, if the economy does not improve, do I have to retain all employees without a reduction in order not to be penalized on loan forgiveness? And William, you should be able to see that question as well.
So, yeah, so there again, SBA is providing additional guidance on all of this. That would be part of what I would call the landing gear. You know, that's going to be the final part. But once you, my thought is, once you submit all the required documentation to your lender, which is going to be, you know, it's going to include your head count, it's going to include an accounting of all the loan funds and their uses. You know, once you provide that and that forgiveness is given, then you move forward. And if something happens in the future, it would not come back to this particular event. And so, you know, once that, again, once you've received forgiveness, I don't think the government or the lender will be coming back to you for additional reports. They won't be asking you about what your head count is 6 months from now or a year from now, based on the information I have today.
Okay.
I have to qualify that.
Thank you. Here's another question. Is there a way to find out the status of our EIDL loan application? Ours was submitted/accepted April 1st, question mark.
Yeah, so we don't have any way. You can call the customer service number, but again, it's my understanding that those folks don't have any information about the status of the loans. We don't have any information here locally on the status. It is taking about 3 weeks. So really the only thing you can do, and I know this is very hard, but patiently wait for a reply from SBA. And hopefully you'll get that soon. Again, we're seeing funds rolling out. It is taking a little longer than they anticipated. But if you did it at the 1st of April, you should be hearing something pretty soon, you know, within a matter of the next few days.
Okay. Here's a question. What is available for new businesses? We're opening this month. We still have all the overhead other businesses have. I was denied a few days ago by the SBA.
Right. If you just opened this month, then you would not have been eligible for the program, unfortunately. You know, if you need additional working capital, you would still potentially qualify for an SBA loan, a regular 7A loan. One thing that is included, and if you look, we don't have a lot of information on this, okay, but I'm going to tell you something that a lot of people probably don't know. If you apply for an SBA loan and receive it before September, you are going to get the same payment forgiveness that I was talking about for the existing SBA loan customers. And so that could be a possibility. If you can't qualify for a disaster loan, you can still apply for a conventional SBA loan and use that as working capital. You still have the opportunity to apply with our micro lenders. Charleston LDC, you know, I know they've been stressed through this as well, but they would be another resource that you could potentially utilize to obtain financing. Work with SCORE and work with SBDC, up your business plan. You know, a lot of things have changed. Hopefully, you know, we'll see businesses opening here in the next couple of weeks. First part of May is my hope. But we'll see how that goes. But you need to address your business plan, get that updated, because I guarantee you a lot has changed since you know, if you did it a month ago, a tremendous amount, a lot of water has gone under the bridge since then. A lot has changed, so it needs to be updated. So you've got some opportunities and some resources and again, SCORE and the SBDC can help you with that.
Very good. Is there a paper printout of the application in the portal that we can print and be working on so we are ready with all needed information when the portal opens?
Good question. Since that just happened today, you know, there is a paper application, and if you go to, it should still be on our website. You still should be able to find that. If you go into the SBA.gov and then go into the disaster section of the website, you should be able to find a paper application for the disaster loan. So you should be able to find that. Now, we'll say the portal is much easier. There's information on that application that you don't have to have, you know, when that comes back online. But that would be one way. You need to have your financial records. You need to have a tax return from last year would be most helpful to you, as well as current financials current up to today. They will ask for some of that information. Now, for PPP, I would encourage you to apply for that when it comes up. And there is, if you go to the Department of Treasury, the application for PPP is on their website.
Okay. We are a temporary staffing agency. If we continue to pay our laid off temporary employees for 8 weeks, but our clients no longer need them or don't reopen in 8 weeks, is the PPP loan paid for those employees' payroll still forgivable?
So the way I understand your question, and this gets to be a little bit gray, but if you're providing temporary employees and those employees were claimed by that business that was utilizing those temporary employees, the staffing agency cannot also claim them. And so I don't know if that's exactly what you're asking or not, but an employee can only be counted one time.
Okay. If your business opens within the 8-week period you're using PPP funds, can you continue to pay employees with funds as you operate?
Yeah, I mean, if that's the whole intent, so here's what could, I'll give you a couple of different scenarios on using these funds. You know, you could have a business like whether it's a retail business or a restaurant, and let's say you got the funds today and you have to start using those funds immediately, and so you have some choices to make. You can rehire, you can put those employees back on the payroll, even though your business is not open. They would be receiving pay in basically what I would call a furlough status. They'd be on some type of or a leave status. It'd be a paid leave. And honestly, that's not doing the business one bit of good. It may help those folks. They may be drawing unemployment. You know, honestly, they may be better off drawing unemployment. And so that's just a situation that you have to look at where you are, what options are available, and go from there and make the decision as what is best for the business.
Okay. If there is no duplication, example, PPP for payroll and EIDL for operations, are they both forgivable?
Only the $10,000 advance on EIDL is forgivable. After that, up to $10,000 advance. So that first advance piece, and it'll be the disaster assistance will make sure that you're aware of which piece is what. But you'll have the initial advance, which is a grant, and that is forgivable. And then if you accept the loan, EIDL loan, it is not forgivable. You will have loan payments that come due. It'll be deferred for 12 months, and then your first payment will be due in about a year from now. The terms on that are for 30 years. The interest rate is 3.75%. So it's still a really good deal, but it is not forgivable. PPP is forgivable.
So this question goes in line with that. Are there any special documents needed for payroll to help get the PPP loan forgiven?
Specific documents have not been released yet, exactly what SBA or your lender will request for that. You know, but all your payroll, typical payroll documents, as well as you know, any checks or invoices, if you're looking at working capital, all of those types of financial records should be available. There will be additional guidance coming out on that, on how exactly how and when that forgiveness can be made.
So is the forgiven amount on PPP just a 75% payroll portion or the entire loan amount?
It can be the entire loan amount.
Okay. And this question is, can you send out bullet points of necessary information to have ready when portal reopens, since the paper app has sections not needed? Sounds like we need, yeah, just I guess a guideline, an itemized list of what's needed.
I can try to look for that. I'll tell you, if you'll send me an email with
Sure.
that request, and my email is william.furman@sba.gov. That's william.furman@sba.gov.
Okay.
I'm pretty sure I have a screenshot of that I can get for you.
And here's one, it goes back to the temporary staffing agency. I'm not sure I'm interpreting this question completely correctly, but how would we know if the other company claims them, those temporary employees?
You would need that, you know, and that's just going to be a situation that the staffing company has to work with the company they're engaged in, and you know, you would not want to. Basically, that would be inaccurate information if you tried to make those claims twice. That may be one that if you want to shoot me an email as well, we can talk specifically about it, and you can give me additional details.
All right, perfect. I'm going to look at the chat box also real quickly. And there are some questions about getting this presentation to folks. We're going to have it on the Chamber website. And if you email me directly, I can send the link to you right away. It's rebecca@mountpleasantchamber.org. I'll repeat William's email as well, william.furman@sba.gov. For those of you who are looking for some banking information, I encourage you to go to the Mount Pleasant Chamber of Commerce directory and go to the Finance and Insurance tab. We do have some local community banks listed there, and I would encourage you to talk with them as well. Is there anything else, William or Mary, that you would like to add?
I just want to thank you for having me. You know, this is a very trying time, but we're going to get through it. You know, SBA is here to assist. There are still some, you know, there's some bumps. There are going to be some bumps in the road, but we understand that, and we're going to work hard together, and we'll get through. We're going to come out on the other side stronger than we were before. And so I just hope everybody stays safe and healthy. And I'm looking forward to getting over this social distancing. I'd much rather be in a room with you. So I'm looking forward to the day that we can do this again, and we'll all get together.
That sounds like a great plan. Thank you so much, William Furman with SBA. Mary Butler with SCORE, as always. You've been a tremendous resource. Stay safe, everybody out there, and thank you for joining us today. This will end our webinar. Thank you.